All right.
Okay, my name is Saul COF, and I wanted to talk about drug prohibition. Okay, alcohol prohibition in the U.S. was a catastrophic idea. Under the 18th Amendment, under the 18th Amendment in 1920, consumption, sale, manufacturing, transportation, and possession of alcohol was prohibited and declared illegal. This led to an increased number of violence, gangs, and increased number of incarcerations. And it was not easy to enforce because it led to so many problems and it was not easy to enforce. It was repealed by the 21st Amendment in 1933. Today, history once again repeats itself, and the same futile attempt to prohibit a demand is attempted, but this time with drug prohibition. Drug prohibition. Okay. This prohibition has led to a so-called war on drugs that has noble intentions, but only horrific outcomes. My main claim is that the war on drugs does more harm than good, and this is because it is designed in a way that indirectly helps cartels. It criminalizes otherwise law-abiding citizens, and it makes the sale of drugs even more unsafe. Okay, so according to Milton Friedman, who is an economist who has won the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences, cartels are basically protected by the government in the sense that they get everything they could ever hope for in this business. They get a monopoly on the sale of drugs, and because of this, they get to implement the prices they want. And with that, they gain even more power to terrorize people. Okay, so, when the government keeps people from selling drugs or growing, per se, their own marijuana, they push out imports or the resources that we have here to sell them. So then what this means is that the only people that are capable of selling any drugs are cartels, and they basically get a monopoly. They don't have any competitors because these competitors would not be able to survive in these harsh environments. And cartels are so large that they can afford to waste resources either in the form of money or people, and they also get to implement the prices they want, which means that if cocaine were to sell for, let's say, $60 to $85 per 3.5 grams, it would if it were legalized, it would sell for less than half that amount. This is information from New Health Advisor. Okay, so according to Rodrigo Canales, who teaches at Yale, Mexican-related drug deaths are more than the number of deaths in the Iraq and Afghanistan war. And these deaths are a result of cartel wars, which some people get in the crossfires of. Okay, illegalizing drugs criminalizes otherwise law-abiding citizens. What I mean by this is that jails are overcrowded with people who have only committed drug-related crimes and no other crime besides that. And what is wrong about this is that even today, any citizen that consumes alcohol back then would be considered breaking the law. Today, the same thing is going on. Any citizen that consumes drugs is seen as a criminal, even though that's his sole crime. I also feel that the focus and money is pointed towards disciplinary measures and not educational ones. According to drugfact.org, the government spends about $9,348 million on disciplinary measurements, such as domestic law enforcement. This is money that could otherwise be used to educate people. I don't know if many people know this, but the cigar companies are are forced to create commercials that promote awareness of the harms of cigarettes. And this has shown to be working. The rates of people smoking have decreased, and this is something that could be implemented with drugs. Instead of wasting so much money on disciplinary measures, they could create more awareness and educate people. Instead of helping people, they just lock them up. An example of this is a young boy in Texas who was facing life prison for making pot brownies. Okay, making drugs illegal makes them far more unsafe. The sale of drugs chases this business underground, which means that instead of if a person wanted to get drugs from someone, or if a person wanted to sell them, they would go into out of the way places where there would be no police intervention, and in these cases, it is easier for them to be harmed, and they can't report anything to the police because what they're doing is already illegal. And by making them illegal, the way they're manufactured is also a lot unsafer. There's a lot more things that could be put into them, and there's no safety guidelines on how to use them. You can more easily overdose on them because they don't have any safety guidelines. I feel that drug prohibition has noble intentions, but it only leads to horrific I think the best way to say this is I don't endorse drug consumption, but I think that the emphasis should be put more on educating people instead of criminalizing them. And it would benefit both the people consuming them and the country in the sense that they could tax it, regulate it, and simply discriminalizing it. And that's my speech.
All right, well, you do have the proposition identified at the beginning. The kind of comparative statement is a little complicated, but we know where you're headed. The contents are previewed to some degree. In the body of the speech, I think you need to signpost those supporting points as you get to them a little bit more clearly. But I was listening, so I did hear when you got to each of those points. I just think that you need to kind of prompt the audience a little bit more on those sorts of things. There's a lot of explanation that goes on. There's a lot of explanation before you actually get to the proposition. There's a lot of explanation that you have about what cartel is and what the criminalization process is and what the safety issue is. There's rarely a lot of information or evidence on any of those points, and I think that you need to be a little bit more consistent about that. You quote Milton Friedman, only I'm not sure if it's a quote from Milton Friedman or it's a paraphrase or if it's an interpretation of what's being said there. I think you want to be a little bit more direct about that. The risks of cartels, for instance, it seems to assume that cartels are the only source for drugs, and I'm not exactly sure that you demonstrated that. I mean, I understand the principle about how the cartels gain power because of the control issues, but I'm not exactly sure that explains how it is that they have sole access to their customer bases. There needs to be a little bit, an example, for instance, would illustrate that. And since you've got the Mexican drug wars listed as one of the illustrating points, I think that would be one of the points that you would talk about. Obviously, if all these cartels are battling each other, there's more than one that's in control, and so that kind of undermines your argument a little bit. Speaking of undermining your argument at the end, the safety issue, I'm a little uncertain when you suggest that you mentioned cigar companies, and I assume you meant cigarette companies too, being required to pay for anti-smoking ads, and that reduces smoking. I'm going, okay. First of all, there's no evidence that says it's reducing smoking, although there probably should be some information that you could find on that. You're kind of equating that, oh, well, couldn't we just do that same sort of thing here? That makes a presupposition that the people who, our citizens don't know about the dangers of drugs. They haven't been informed about those things. I'm not sure that you demonstrate that. But the argument that I was talking about that might be undermining your position is, look, if people are willing to go someplace where it's dangerous, take a substance that's uncontrolled, do you really think that some TV commercial is going to discourage them from engaging in this kind of reckless behavior? That seems like it's an awfully big inference to make that runs counter to the position that you were taking before. At the end of the speech, you throw in a couple of extra advantages of legalization, for instance, and I think that diverts us from the point. You need to demonstrate that an alternative way of treating these issues would be more effective, and I didn't really hear much development of that argument. I heard a lot of criticism of the way the war on drugs is working or some of the complications that it creates. What I need is the demonstration of the other, that the alternative isn't worse, and that's part of your argument, so I need that comparative statement. All right, thank you. Did you have an outline for me?